So I'm going to be completely transparent here. I didn't like this game all that much, and playing through it felt like a chore. Especially after playing Ghost of Tsushima. And I'm not saying the game was perfect, but a lot of us can agree that it's the new standard for any game that involves swordsmen in old Japan. Rise of the Ronin is no Ghost of Tsushima. It's no Sekiro. Hell, it's not even Onimusha. But with that being said, it had a few things that I did like. Enough of them that I had to make a video on it, despite my overall indifference to the game as a whole. So before anyone takes it personal, hear me out first, and if you're still angry after that, then bring your best kimono, cause we running the blades, and only one of us is walking out of that ring. You fuck! As always, I won't be spoiling the story except for the very gist of it. So you play as a Ronin, a wandering samurai during the Bakumatsu period where Japan experienced major shifts in government and foreign policy due to the arrival of Americans. This led to civil war between those who support foreign trade with Americans and those who wish to remain isolated from them. In the midst of the chaos, you and your twin are sent to kill Commodore Matthew Perry, a key figure in the Japanese-American trade. Of course, the mission's a complete failure at the cost of your twin's life. Shortly after, your clan's village is attacked, forcing you to abandon your home. And believing your twin is still alive out there, you go out searching for them, while getting mixed up in Japan's Civil War. And that's when the game truly opens up. So yeah, the story is pretty straightforward. In fact, I don't think Team Ninja games ever have complicated stories, and I've never complained about them. But this time around, man, I don't know, it felt a little too rushed. Especially in the beginning. The beginning of the story shows a very brief cutscene of the twins' backstory, where their childhood village is attacked, but then rescued by an old woman who happens to be the leader of the Veiled Edge, Japanese radicals who fight against the Japanese-American foreign trade. The old woman raises them up as assassins, but it'd be nice to show a brief montage of her training them, because maybe then her death would actually mean something, after I've actually gotten to know her as a character. And I didn't mention this earlier because of how stupid it was. But when the clan was raided by assassins, the old woman turns her blade towards the character when she learns they plan to leave the village. With her blade to their throat, she says, "No one should abandon the clan." Bitch, do you not see all these guys trying to put us in the dirt? We can talk about this shit later, we gotta go. But no, boom, top 10 dumbest deaths in video game history. It just felt so forced and rushed, and I'm sure the game devs wanted some emotional impact. Otherwise, why not have the assassins kill her instead? Seriously, it would have made more sense if she sacrificed herself so her student could get away. But whatever. And that brings me to the characters. Why do they all look straight out of a PS3 game? I know graphics aren't everything, but this is on the PlayStation 5. There's no excuse as to why they look like mannequins when talking to you. They barely move and show no emotion, as if everyone was injected with Botox. Again, this is a $70 game for the PlayStation 5. It may not bother a lot of people, especially if they really enjoyed this game, but it's hard to get invested in these characters when most of them have the emotional depth of a cardboard cutout. And speaking of character interactions, look, I'm a little split on the main character here. Being a Souls-like, I expected another silent protagonist, but to my surprise, the main character actually speaks, which is a nice change of pace. Too bad they speak so rarely that it throws me off every time they do. Look, I get that having a silent protagonist makes the process easier for writers, cause it's one less character to write dialogue for, but it creates this sense of inconsistency whenever they do speak, especially in a game that has dialogue trees. Team Ninja's previous games, Wolong and Neo 2, had silent protagonists, and Neo's main character, William Adams, barely spoke himself. So it's nothing new for them, but they were already going out of their comfort zone when making their first open world game. So making a protagonist with their own personality would have been a regular Tuesday for them, come on! And speaking of character dialogue, it doesn't feel like my character has a say in most of the situations they get mixed up in. Ironic, I know. But what I mean is that the game was portrayed as having choices and consequences that heavily impacts the story. And they push that as soon as the game truly opens up when you run into another samurai, Ryoma Sakamoto. Yes, that Ryoma Sakamoto. At that point, you have the options to either help the shogunate open up Japan's borders to American trade, or to fight against that and keep Japan isolated. Sounds good on paper, not so well in execution, because no matter who I helped, it still felt like I was put on a linear path in order to keep the plot going. And I'd be fine with that if that's what's expected, but I hate the false sense of control game developers pull just to hype their game up. But when they're like,
the choices are yours and yours alone.
Bitch, no they're not. If I go outside and shoot someone's grandma, I'm going to jail. But it was my choice and my consequence. But I'm not trying to do that. And that's what video games are for. To carry out shit I wouldn't do in real life. With that being said, there were a few major moments where I weighed my options carefully. But they were so far apart from each other that they felt inconsequential with little impact on the rest of the journey. I don't know, man. I really miss games like The Witcher and the Mass Effect trilogy, where you were put on the spot, and depending on what you said or did, truly affected you and everyone around, whether you liked it or not. But I guess it's too much work for writers to reach that level of storytelling nowadays. But despite me bitching about the story's execution, it was somewhat interesting, enough to want to see how it ends. And the story does have a lot of good moments where things got emotional and real intense. Moments where you really felt for the characters, the pain and sacrifice, fighting for a cause they'll die for. But you have so much fluff to cut through just to enjoy them. And the characters aren't too bad, but a little boring. They all seem to be cut from the same cloth. You either support the shogunate or you don't. There's no in between with them. The only characters who really stuck out were Taka Murayama, a geisha with a personal connection with the shogun's right-hand man, and Ryoma Sakamoto, the aforementioned samurai who's conflicted with the endless bloodshed of Japan's Civil War and questions what side he should be fighting for. Meeting them for the first time felt as generic as everyone else's introduction, but it felt well worth the trouble when learning about their backstories. Too bad you don't get that from the other characters in a game that focuses on building relationships with your allies. Though the Ronin protagonist rarely speaks, I like them more than the ones from the previous games, where they simply got swept up in the main plot with no personal connection. But with their twin working for the Americans, the very people they were trained to kill, the protagonist has no choice but to get involved. With that being said, I really wish we spent more time with the twin, to establish a deep relationship between them. These are two people raised together as twin assassins. Does that not sound cool as hell? Sure does, love to see it. But aside from the beginning of the game, the only times they interact is when they're fighting each other. But again, the protagonist has a personal connection to the overall plot, so it's a step in the right direction. I just hope they add a little more character to the next cast of emotionless mannequins in the next game. Now, Team Ninja is known for their aggressive and fierce combat, my favorite being Neo 2. But I didn't really enjoy the combat this time around. It felt decent at best, with it getting pretty boring at times. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of variety with every weapon class having their own styles of combat, and then many sub-weapons at your disposal, from bows and guns to shuriken and bombs. That's fine, I love those mechanics, especially when you find the weapons that fit your playstyle, mine being the oxtail sword and spear for high DPS and good reach. But I say it's boring because of how repetitive the missions feel. They start and end the same way. You talk to someone in need, you head to the enemy base, you kill everyone in sight, then you kill the boss at the end. And it's like that the entire time. Main missions, side quests, it's all the same, with the only other variation is catching the occasional stray cat for special rewards. Wow, so much fun. All games get repetitive to a certain extent, I know, but it's the variation in gameplay that keeps our attention throughout the entire journey. It's as if the developers felt the combat alone would carry them throughout the entire game, but sadly that's not the case. Team Ninja games are usually fun and in your face. but I think the open world design makes it look shallow and monotonous because it relies so much on the combat. I honestly think the mission-based gameplay of their previous work is the best approach for their style of games, because you experience them in small doses. But when you're being sent from one end of the map to another, doing the same thing over and over and over again, it really shows. And I really hate to compare it to Ghost of Tsushima, but even though that game became repetitive as well, it never felt monotonous because Sucker Punch knew how to break up the repetition through different activities, like making haikus, chasing foxes for upgrades, bamboo cutting minigames, and other shit. Team Ninja just doesn't do that. And as I said earlier, I enjoy the combat, but there's something about it that really pisses me off, namely the parry system. There are certain moves that you just can't block, so you have to dodge or parry them, and you'll notice them through red flashes. But for some fucking reason, the game developers made it hard for you to notice the red flashes, often resulting in you mistiming the parry, just to get put in the dirt. And it makes me so mad because those red attacks deal so much damage. And it's not like, oh, you just gotta memorize the enemy patterns. No bitch, it barely shows on some of these character models, and when you do see it, it's so brief that it barely gives you a chance to react. Sekiro had it right when it would show a kanji above the enemy's head. That way, it didn't matter how big they were, you could still see it and react accordingly. I played a lot of Sekiro, so I mean it when I say this parry mechanic is so stupid. All they had to do was make the indicator more noticeable to the player. And I know there's going to be someone thinking, I could see it perfectly fine. Maybe you're just blind. Bars. And to that, I say good for you. But just know that your time is coming, when one day you're going to have to wear these thick ass Coke bottle glasses just to see 5 feet in front of you. And I know it's nothing new with Team Ninja games, but what's up with the loot system? Look, I love the various weapons and armor you get, but it gets so overwhelming by how often they drop. It makes it kinda hard to enjoy your current setup, especially if you're simple-minded like me, who only focuses on the damage output instead of their own unique stats. But they had the same issue on previous games with fans asking them to tone down the drop rate, and even now it still falls on deaf ears, so it's no point in going too deep into this minor annoyance. So, if you made it this far, you're a real one. I would give you a Kori Kenshin Nutrigrain bar, but I'm still waiting for mine, so here's this instead. Hopefully that made a couple of you a little less angry for talking shit about your favorite game. But as I mentioned earlier, Rise of the Ronin has a couple of factors that make it fun to play. But beneath all that fluff is a pretty mediocre game that relies too much on its fun combat system, hoping that you don't notice the flaws in its overall execution. So really, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But at the end of the day, it's just an opinion based on my own personal experience, and it's not meant to belittle anyone who loves Rise of the Ronin. With that being said, the next game we'll be looking at will be Black Myth Wukong, a game that's been teased for like 4 years now. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and feel free to like and subscribe for more content. Until next time, take care.